Committee works by motion, or lack thereof. Delegate Bagby, I would have made a motion, or I support sort of carrying this over and having those conversations and moving forward. That's an emotion. It continues to lie with us, which is the effect of virtually carrying it over for. Properly moved and seconded that House Bill 838 be reported as substituted. Nope. All right, if folks would vote on that motion. And that motion fails on a 3 to 6 votes. All right, yes, sir. Thank you, Delegate. All right, next we have Delegate Brewer, House Bill 524.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good morning. Please go ahead, Delegate. Tell us what your bill does and why.
Absolutely, good morning, Mr. Chairman. HB 524 is a license plate bill. What this is designed to do is remove a one-time $10 fee for Distinguished Military Service Awards, including the Bronze Star of Valor, Bronze Star, Silver Star Navy Cross, Distinguished Service Cross, Air Force Cross, Distinguished Red Cross, and the Legion of Merit Medal. I believe this is a very distinguished set of folks. It is obviously just for very specific award winners, and I would like to consider it as well.
All right, Delegate, thank you very much. Members, have any questions? No? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in opposition? Delegate Davis.
Delegate, are there any other groups right now that we waive the $10 fee for?
There is one group I'm aware of, and it's the volunteer firefighters.
All right. Need a motion. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of great groups out there in our military, both retired and active duty, and I think there's a lot of merit to the delegate's bill. My question is, since this is kind of a new avenue we're delving into, and maybe there's some other groups that deserve this type of recognition as well, that we consider carrying this bill over under Rule 22 to look for other organizations and do this as one robust solution, as opposed to maybe that Christmas tree that sometimes tends to happen.
All right. Properly moved and seconded that House Bill 524 be carried over under Rule 22. Everybody understand? And that's a voice vote. All in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nope. Your bill carries over. I appreciate your advocacy, Delegate Brewer, obviously for our veterans. Everyone on this day respects and appreciates our veterans and those who have worn the cloth to defend us, whether they know us or our families does not. Appreciate you as well, working with Delegate Davis in the effort. All right. Delegate Kilgore has signed up, but he has asked that his bill be carried over for the year under 22, Rule 22. His bill basically would have changed smart scale for 2 districts for his area, neck of the woods. They're really being challenged down there with being able to qualify for some of the statewide funds outside of the State of Good Repair funding. I think we're all very sensitive to that. I think we've had about 2 years or so, maybe 3 years, I guess, for smart scale to really sort of come into evolution. I think folks are very, Deputy Secretary Donahue, people I think are very appreciative of all the work you've done exhaustively in this topic. But I would entertain a motion to carry over House Bill 1263. Properly moved and seconded. Anybody have any questions? Anyone come here to speak in favor of that? In the absence, anyone in opposition? All right. Members, by voice vote. All those in favor of carrying over House Bill 1263, signify by saying aye. 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 Anybody opposed? All right, it's carried over for the year. Delegate Adams, you're next on the queue. Yes, ma'am. If you would please tell us what your bill does and why we need your bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members
Good
of the
morning.
committee.
Transit Industries. Without objection and by general consensus, it will be adopted. So House Bill 712, as amended, is properly before us. Delegate, tell us why your bill and tell us
Yes, sir.
what it does, please.
HB 712 is a bill before you that essentially restores the language for naming public highways, bridges, and other transportation facilities to that of the pre-2012 code and returning the commemorative nature of these entities to the board. In 2012, the code was changed to afford private entities the ability to name highways, bridges, and the like after people living are dead for a fee. Since that time, a couple of things have happened. The federal government now prohibits the commercialized naming of public transportation entities, and we have discovered that there's little appetite for private participation across the Commonwealth. This bill would bring the code into compliance with the current practice and restore the dignity of commemorative naming. The substitute specifically retains language that would in any way cause confusion and in that if we removed it, people might think that profanity was acceptable as part of the naming process.
All right, Delegate. Members have any questions? Hey, Delegate. Yes, sir, Delegate Davis.
Delegate, how long has this been in process, or this allowance been in process for the competitive naming?
Since 2012.
May I have a follow-up?
Yes, sir,
And
Delegate Davis.
are you aware of any uses, or has this been used for any opportunities for bridges or otherwise?
My understanding that it's been extremely limited. There is a representative of the board here. They might be able to give you more detail.
So why don't we bring Joanne up with VDOT, because she can shed some light on this as well. My understanding is there's some federal issues that have been raised.
Mr. Chair, Joanne Maxwell from VDOT. This is a VDOT bill. This, as noted by Delegate Adams, this legislation was introduced in 2012. There have been no instances where this has actually been exercised by private entities. That's primarily because of the fact at some point in 2014, the Federal Highway Administration came out with an order, a policy about sponsorships of highways, and they basically, in that specific order, addressed naming specifically, explicitly, and said that any entity that pays, in essence, a fee or any kinds of consideration in exchange for having a highway named after them would constitute advertising and was in violation of federal law against advertising on federal aid primaries, et cetera. So any attempts to implement this have been basically thwarted by the federal order.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Delegate Davis.
So in essence, this bill does nothing but bring us in sync with federal law at this point. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chair, what it does is it brings us back to the point where we were before 2012, where the CTV's namings are truly commemorative. If they're named after an individual, the namings are commemorative. They can also be, the commemorative nature of those names can also apply to groups. So they.
One follow, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I may rephrase. So, per federal law, we are not allowed to practice what our code says today.
Mr. Chair, that is accurate.
Okay.
That is
Perfect.
All right, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been my understanding and experience at the local level that the only time that applies is if federal money was actually used on that road. So we have, for instance, a road built around our hospital where there was no federal funding. So a lot of those normal restrictions that come down from the federal government just do not apply to those roads. So I believe there may be some instances where that would not apply. Could you?
Mr. Chair, when you look at the order, the feds don't seem to restrict it to federal aid highways, to primaries, federal aid primaries, et cetera. There may be an argument to that effect, but at this point, we have not. Another issue that has thwarted this effort was when we first were implementing this legislation. We had a study done by a consultant who looked at the market for this and the appetite that might be out there for this type of situation, or this type of naming process, and they basically came back and said there would be very little appetite. Entities just would not be that interested in naming, would not be interested in paying a fee to name a highway and to continue that name and pay an annual fee. Now, one thing that the federal law does still permit is a sponsorship situation where an entity can come in and they can provide funding or other forms of consideration, and they are able to obtain an acknowledgement sign that basically acknowledges the fact that they have been supporting or providing supportive funding, support, and other forms of consideration for that particular highway. But the explicitly naming that road after that entity has been prohibited in the based on the federal order. We don't know what would happen if we attempted to name a non-federal aid highway after a private entity for a fee. We're not sure how the feds would come out on that.
All right. Joanne, so are there any transportation facilities, roads, bridges, ferries, toll facilities, blah, 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 around the state that are currently named for a living person? Is there a George Bush Road somewhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Because you've just now made all those localities have to go and undo every living person's named transportation facility across the Commonwealth.
Mr. Chair, I will have to check on that. I don't know, and this would not rescind that. I mean, it would not rescind an existing naming, but what it would do is prevent the board in the future. I know for a fact that the board has not, I'm pretty safe in saying this, the board has never named a highway after a living person. That's not to say the General Assembly may not have done that, but I have not gone back and researched that issue. There's something in my mind that makes me think there might have been one naming by the General Assembly for a live person, but I'm not positive.
Because, and as I read it, again, smarter lawyers than me, I ain't a lawyer, but line 19 says a living person shall not be used for such purposes, but it also doesn't grandfather any extant transportation facilities, which are roads, bridges, tunnels, overpasses, ferries, airports, mass transit facilities, vehicle parking facilities. If there's some park and ride somewhere that's named after, I don't know. I'm not trying to muddy the water. I just want to make sure the law of unintended consequences doesn't come back and affect all of these members, that some locality somewhere has named some sort of a piece of a road or a bridge or something after somebody that's currently living, and now is going to feel compelled to have to go change all of that.
Mr. Chair, this addresses namings by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. There are localities do have authority to name roads that fall under their jurisdiction. However, this bill only addresses namings by the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
Except under line 17 and 18, it also say Herring also named by the General Assembly.
But Mr. Chair, the General Assembly could always pass a law that changes this. In other words, the General Assembly passes naming bills every year. And the General Assembly, if they so choose, could overcome the statute by, if they wanted to name a road for a private entity or a living person, the Assembly could do that with a naming bill. I don't think this law would bind the General Assembly for any future namings, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, would it be helpful to add something in the nature of that would prevent rescinding or ensuring that something is grandfathered?
I think it would help, but it would also help, Joanne, if we could maybe, if it's okay with the members, to maybe take the spot today, let you go and research and make sure we're not going to undo something, some road somewhere, some transportation facility somewhere in the Commonwealth that's either been named by CTB or the General Assembly at some point in time that is actually for a living person. I get it that, to Delegate Davis's inquiries, I get it that feds have changed, I get it that nobody's used this since Delegate Lingenfelter in 2012. Remember, 2013 is when we raised a lot of funding. 2012, Delegate Lingenfelter was really very focused on trying to figure out creative and clever ways of doing that. We put into the code that, in essence, CDB could offer some naming rights in return for compensation. Seemed like it made some sense. It was a clever way without having to raise taxes to actually raise dedicated transportation funding. But if it hasn't been subscribed to, and if now the feds say effectively you're not allowed to do that, I get it why we need to change our code to be reflective of that. I just want to make sure, Joanne, that we don't have any unintended consequences. So,
That's fine.
yep. I need a second. Somebody else. Let's take it by for the day, and that's just a voice vote. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We got a little bit more to
Thank
do.
you,
We'll
Mr.
see you
Chair.
next week.
Appreciate it.
It's okay. We'll work through some of those moving
Thank you very
parts.
much.
Absolutely. Delegate Gilbert's House Bill 1012 is also before us, and I spoke with the delegate. This is legislation that would, in essence, we've had very full and fair conversations about driving in the left lane. His bill would, in essence, say that you just can't be in the left lane at all unless you're, that's I guess on line 53, no vehicle shall be driven in the leftmost lane whenever the operation may be impeded by the use of somebody else in that lane. He's asked us if this could just be carried over, and he's got some more work. He's got some roads out his way, and obviously 81 through his way. That is really very much of a challenge, and I think he's still working with some of the stakeholders. So I'll entertain a motion to carry over 1012. Properly moved and seconded that House Bill 1012 be carried over under Rule 22. That does require a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, 1012 is carried over for the year. Delegate Watts, you've been very patient. Draw the committee's attention to House Bill 308. As the committee will recall, we began to hear this last week, and we carried it by for the delegate to finish the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey says. Yes, ma'am, please.
That's right. And just to refresh, this has to do with passing on the right, and it amends that code statute by saying you cannot cross a solid line indicating a bike lane. There were exceptions that addressed concerns of the state police regarding law enforcement, and this now comes back with the rest of the story to make sure in the amendment that has been prepared. As you saw it last week, it had made exceptions for any towing vehicles, any accident situation, or directed by law enforcement, and the new language before you says, or when the roadway is otherwise impassable due to weather conditions, an accident, or an emergency situation. The word emergency situation appears elsewhere in 46.2, and so it has a history as far as interpretation.
Move the amendment.
Properly moved and seconded. Everybody, by general consensus, actually, and without objection, it's properly before. So 308 is amended properly. So please tell us, well, I think we know what the bill does and sort of why the bill, because we discussed that at length before. Is anyone here to speak in favor of this legislation? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, Bud By from Virginia Bicycling Federation. This has been a problem in some parts of the state, and it just really seconds the general rule where you have a solid line, you're not supposed to cross over it. And there have been people jumping into that, impatient people jumping into the vacant bike lane. They think it's vacant, and someone may be in there, and some have gotten hit. Cyclists have gotten hit as impatient drivers and trying to get past a couple of others who are stopped. They'll jump into that line, and this will make it pretty clear that they're not supposed to cross that solid line, not a broken line, but a solid line, in order to pass another vehicle.
Right. And just to add some clarity for the members all know as well, we're not, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you're not supposed to cross a solid white line, but you in fact can cross solid, even double solid yellow lines if it's safe to do so. We require that now. Yeah, you can, because now we got lane widths that are so narrow, and we said you got to pass bicycles by 3 feet and other motor vehicles by 2 feet. Sometimes that requires you, when it's safe to do so, to traverse into the other lane. So. All right, members understand what the bill does? And Delegate Watts, just, I think from what I recall last week, I think it was Delegate Davis that had raised some concerns as well, and they're concerns that I have back in my own district. Some bicycle lanes are striped, and they're the farthest to the right of the traveling lanes. In my district, we'll have the moving lane, then we have a striped bicycle lane with the bicycle logos in it, and then we'll have another lane which is effectively parking on. So folks are regularly, routinely, simply to park their vehicles, they have to traverse that lane. I think, is Captain Maxey here? Maxey, so if somebody were to, I want to address Mr. Vines and make sure that I don't misspeak. If a vehicle strikes a motorcyclist that's in a bicycle lane today, who would have the right of way? And the gentleman's testimony was that people are getting struck and that, you know, there's not anybody that's sort of accountable. But I think you'd made testimony, I think we've had this bill before last year and so forth, that in effect, you're going to take into consideration, I have a higher duty to make sure before I traverse into any lane, whether it's a bicycle lane or an oncoming lane or a passing lane, I have a higher duty to make sure that I'm not impacting traffic that is behind me or to the sides or in front.
Right, Mr. Chairman, Ron Maxey, Virginia State Police. That's correct. The vehicle would be making the maneuver, so it would be the obligation of that vehicle's operator to make sure that movement can be made safely. A bicycle in certain situations is also deemed to be a vehicle, so when it's in that path of travel, it would have the right of way.
All right, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Delegate Watson.
as I've said before, I'm new on the committee, so if I understand this bill correctly, we're making something that is already illegal, more illegal. So,
Well, and Delegate Watson, just, and for sometimes, and my attorneys call it, what's the phrase they use? It's a term of art. I'll think about it in a second. Sometimes we actually do that just to really make the point that something is really needs to be attended to legally. So
And Mr.
I'll
Chairman,
think of the term.
if
Have an
I,
abundance of caution, thank you.
and this came before the committee because of a constituent's problem that I had as to whether or not he was properly charged. This makes it clear that this is a proper charge.
Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in Virginia Beach, I'd love to have this. I think that we can use a little bit more of this in Virginia Beach. Since the last meeting, I've tried to talk to some people as well, and I understand all the counties in Virginia are different. I understand the issues you've got in your neck of the woods and a couple of others. So for that reason, I moved the PBI to bill.
All right. Properly moved and seconded that House Bill 308 be, as amended, be passed by indefinitely. You have 2 minutes. Delegate Watson.
I was trying to follow the logic that I'd love to have it, but this is not it. It is, I thought, a simple bill to clarify the law, to make sure that in fact the passing on the right, it doesn't affect parking, it doesn't affect going into a driveway. I'm finding in this area, we see more and more bicycle lanes because more and more millennials don't really get their driver's license like we used to crave that driver's license in first car. So I think this is reflective of current traffic movements, and it is an important clarification.
Anyone in opposition, you get 2 minutes. No? All right. Everybody understand the motion before us, House Bill 308 is amended to pass by indefinitely. This does require a recorded vote on the electronic vote. And the measure to pass by indefinitely fails on a 5 to 5 vote. Looks to me like 6. No, hang with me. If the vote's not recorded, if the clerk would close the board, so it passes on a 6 to 4 vote. All right. It is PBI. All right, Delegate, thank you very much. And Delegate Delegate Yancey, you want to give us yours? I draw the committee's attention to the chairman's bill, House Bill 955. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I believe we have a substitute.
Mr. Chairman and members, bring your attention House Bill 955, and there is a line amendment at line 44, introduced after electric, insert more natural gas.
Everybody understand what the amendment does? Without objection and by general consensus, it's amended. All right, 955 is amended as properly forced. Delegate Gantz, if you would, Mr. Chairman, tell us why your bill and what it does,
Thank
please.
you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. What House Bill 955 seeks to achieve requires motorists to change lanes to provide safety clearance to stationary emergency vehicles with flashing lights parked next to roadways. This move over law, if you will, is currently statute in 14 states, and it permits amber lights for utility and gas vehicles in this bill. As responders to emergencies, natural disasters, thunderstorms, hurricanes and the like, snowstorms, such as the one today, often utility vehicles, electric utility vehicles, gas utility vehicles will be on the sides of roads, or they'll be coming in to be able to get the utilities turned back on. And so all this bill does, this move over law, just provides safety and coverage for them in order to be able to do what they do, in order to be able to get the utilities back online quickly.
All right, sir. Members have questions? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this legislation? Yes, sir.
Chairman Scott McGarry, Washington Gas, we support the bill. We serve over a million customers, half of whom are in the Commonwealth. We think this bill will increase safety and be in the interest of all, and hope to be a pleasure to recommend it. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Love the smiles.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Beamer with Community Energy. We support this bill for the reasons stated for safety.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee,
Love the smiles. We like smiles up here.
I'm here on behalf of Columbia Gas of Virginia, and we also support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No one else in favor? Anyone in opposition to this legislation? Members understand what we're voting on? Any other questions? Probably moved in, seconded that House Bill 955 as amended be reported. That's a recorded vote. If members would vote on the electric on the board. Yep. Yep. All right. Clerk will close the board. It says, it reports on a 7-0 vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Delegate Ross, you have two bills, I believe, before us. Which would you like to take up first? All right, 1489, draw the members' attention. Actually, let's take up 1282 first. I suspect there'll be more conversation on 1489. So let's take up 1282 first. Delegate. Draw the members' attention to Delegate Rock and House Bill 1282. Good morning, sir. Tell us why your bill and what it does, please.
Yeah, local law enforcement pointed out to me that they are spending a considerable amount of time enforcing vehicles parked in the right of way, and asked that we amend the law so that they would receive monies for undisputed ticket revenue for that violation. And that's what the bill proposes to do.
All right, sir. Members have any questions? And Delegate, I didn't see a fiscal impact statement to this, but it certainly strikes me that it's going to have an impact on state revenue if we're taking away all the revenue from parking tickets effectively and diverting that towards the localities. Am I misreading this, or Emma, or Chrissy, or?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received a request from the Speaker's Office that this go to appropriations, but if it be the will of the committee, it can be reported and referred.
All right. Members have any questions? No? Is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this bill? Anyone to speak in opposition? All right, we got nobody here from VML and NACO to say that we like it. We got nobody here from VDOT or from DMV to say this is going to take all of our funding away. Okay.
That would indicate peace in the valley.
No, I'm not so sure that's peace in the valley. Good try. That's strong work.
I think there's definitely a lot of merit to this. I think it may help a lot of localities. I was being military today, but personal discussions, if we can do some more work on this, since the delegate would be willing to do so over the off-season, I would move that we carry this over into Rule 22.
All right. The properly moved and seconded that 1282 be carried over under Rule 22 so that we can continue to have those conversations. Certainly, and I get it. I think, Delegate Locke, what you're certainly standing strong for your locality, sir. Loudoun County should be proud, and I respect say that sincerely, sir. Members understand? To the voice vote that House Bill 1282 be carried over under Rule 22. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? One nay vote. All right. It carries over, sir. All right, let's draw the committee's attention to House Bill 1489. Delegate Rock, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as an introductory to this bill, I need to tell a very short story of tolling in Northern Virginia.
Blessed be the brief.
Thank you, sir. Would that be a 2 minutes brief or?
Depends on how blessed you want to be, sir.
Several decades into moments. You have probably heard in the news that recently tolls on the newly tolled starting December 4th section of I-66 inside the Beltway have reached close to $50. I think the new record is somewhere around $47. This reflects an attitude, an ongoing attitude over many years of treating the people of Western Loudoun and parts of Fairfax as cash cows. Now, I'm here to speak for those people because there are many advocacies who love that revenue stream, but they are milking it dry and having a very detrimental effect on the working people of the district that I serve and others, which translates out into the economy as well. So in addition to this toll that may average less than 47, I think Deputy Secretary Donahue would say it's closer to 13.50. It fluctuates wildly. So if you're driving on this corridor, one day you may encounter a toll on this particular portion of I-66 that would be $5. Another day it might be 30. So it makes it very unpredictable. Again, moving east to west on this what we call the Dulles corridor, which starts for the people I serve in Leesburg. You start out by swiping a card or your Easy Pass will record a $5 or $6 toll on the Dulles Greenway, privately owned entity. You then hardly even, by passing through another set of toll gates, you pay another $3.50. That gets you up close to $10 just to start your day and get to the newly tolled portion of I-66 inside the Beltway. Not at all beyond the likelihood very likely you may encounter tolls $40, $50, $60, and that is one way. So these tolls have really gotten out of control. This I-66 inside the Beltway is partly connected with it has restored order to this portion of the road, which was very, very congested, and that is a good effort. However, the tolls are being used to fund improvements in the corridor, but the tolls have taken place prior to the completion of the lanes, which would be funded by these tolls. So that is something that perhaps was a little bit out of an ideal sequence. I-66 inside the Beltway lane expansion will proceed and be completed. The projection is around 2020. You'll notice that the different provisions that I have put before this body to provide some degree of relief for these tolls are for the period of time which would be from if this were to pass into law, to the time that those lanes would be completed. So we're providing asking to provide some temporary toll relief for the period of time while those lanes are under construction, with the expectation that once they are complete, this section of the Dulles, inside the Beltway would be moderated, the amount of use and the tolls would then kind of by virtue of the mathematical equation that governs this dynamic tolling would be more would be reduced, simply put. So there's, again, I'm going to shift now to a little more of the substance of the bill. Thank you for indulging me with the sad story.
Yes, sir.
I have, after working with our council, she has aptly helped us compose a bill that accomplished basically, I'll say 4 things. The first one would be to instruct Virginia Department of Transportation to adjust the times, to provide some times during which the single occupant vehicles would be tolled on this stretch of I-66 inside the Beltway. The purpose for that is that previously those brackets of time were 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the evening. Those were expanded to 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the evening. And it makes the commute very testimony, I believe, from Deputy Secretary, is that perhaps having some baggage with it. I'll wait and address my response to that once it's presented. The next proposal in the way of this several items of toll relief is to request this body to instruct the Virginia Department of Transportation to refund. Okay, this I-66 inside the Beltway is controlled by Virginia Department of Transportation. I want to emphasize that. So we're asking them to refund monies paid in the amount of $200 per calendar month. Anything beyond $200. And I'm working from the summary, Mr. Chairman, so if we need to jump to the lines, just to say so. The next item, moving right along, so that's simple enough, and certainly can answer questions after I just read through these other couple items. When this new tolling of I-66 inside the Beltway was proposed by the governor, it was rolled out as being something. There were a number of tolls that were tossed around. I think $17 had a lot of attention during the campaign. I don't think anybody really believed that. That would be the average of east-west tolls in any one given day. I have a press release here from the governor that says that they would not exceed $6. So these are all expectations. It's dynamic tolling. It's hard to pin it down. But the original rollout of this in several of the presentations talked about tolling this stretch of road, which would be eastbound in the morning, westbound in the morning, and vice versa in the evening. Somewhere along the line, I think someone made a phone call, and the effect that came about as a result of whatever communication was that the only people to be told on this were the ones that were heading east in the morning and west in the evening. That's the people that I serve, and that made this continue to be a free road for people traveling west in the morning and east in the evening. So highly inequitable, and for that reason, propose changing the tolling structure now so that the road would be tolled in both directions, both times a day. Perfectly equitable proposal, and I haven't heard anyone dispute that. Lastly, is a two-part item, which is jumping to a different part of this corridor, moving west to the portion of the Dulles corridor, which is between the Dulles Airport and the 495. And that is a massive right-of-way that was established by the federal government, massive taking of land by eminent domain and other means. And inside that corridor is an outgrading center is constructing an electric train to bring people east-west. Outside that are 2 lanes east, 2 lanes west. That's called the Dulles Access Road. That's a driveway to the airport, free people going to and from the airport. Most of the time, that road is way underutilized. You can, if you're sitting in heavy traffic in the next set of 2 lanes, which is the Dulles Toll Road, constructed by the people of Virginia, paid for with our tax dollars, but turned over to the airport to control for, I think, approximately 50 years, is the Dulles Toll Road. Part of the obligation in the document that governs the transfer of the control of that road from Virginia to the Airports Authority provides different obligations of the Airports Authority, maintenance, and another one that I want to draw attention to is that as the road network in the region is building out, and we I think have reached that point in this area, that the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority would be obligated to install dynamic tolling on the outer lanes on the Dulles Toll Road, which they control. This proposes that Virginia Department of Transportation would explore with MWA, that's the acronym for Washington Airports Authority, and the federal government, who owns the Dulles Access Highway, explore the possibility of flipping the obligation to put dynamic tolling on the Dulles Toll Road and use it to turn the underutilized lanes toward the center into hot lanes, effectively creating a new revenue stream, utilizing an asset that is currently there, and fulfilling an obligation that currently exists, and then moving those revenues to offset some of the toll burden And then, last but not least, going back to 2006, I think it was, when then Governor Tim Kaine jumped in and decided that we needed a funding stream for the Metro project. At that point in time, I think he unilaterally decided, without any action by this legislature, that asset would be transferred from control of Virginia to control of the Airports Authority. At that point in time, he was breaking a promise that had been made very public, that road would be turned into a free road upon completion. Promise not kept. We'd like to have VDOT negotiate with the Airports Authority to structure a whole variety of things so that on 2030, when we reach the year 2030, that road would become a free road, meaning the Dulles Toll Road would cease to be the cash cow for the airport. And I'll just add one just a little bit of context about expectations. When around the time the transfer was initiated, the proposed toll on that road, where the promise was that the toll on the Dulles Toll Road, which is now, I think, close to, I said you paid $3.50. It's a little bit complicated because the Dulles Greenway collects a portion of the toll. But effectively, it's about $5 that goes to the Dulles Toll Road to MWA. The expectation at that point in time was that would not exceed 75 cents. So these proposals come forward. They're maybe somewhat harmless, but they have really just gotten out of control. I would guess, and this is just pure speculation, that there is no stretch of road and no people asked to bear a greater burden than this stretch of road and the people of Loudoun County where I serve, in the whole world, United States or the world. People cannot, without getting a second job to pay their tolls, come up with $120 round trip every day to get back and forth to work. So that, I think I've outlined the meat of this, and be glad to ask questions, and I thank council for so aptly drafting these 4 asks into all these words that would hopefully make it possible. Thank you.
All right, Delegate, thank you very much. A very thorough discussion. Members have any questions? Delegate Blossom.
Mr. Chairman, is there a substitute or with the other? I've got 2 asks in on that I can figure out.
My understanding from council is the delegate didn't need a substitute, or this is what we have before us. Is that correct, delegate?
Mr. Chairman, I did ask the council to draft a substitute, and I prefer to present it when and if the Deputy Secretary raises concerns. I have concerns of a compensation event, which is outlined in the comprehensive agreement governing a completely different road project, which is kind of hard to explain, hard to understand how it came into existence. But if I may hold the substitute until we've heard testimony from others.
All right, so what we have before us is House Bill 1489 without the substitute. That's what is presented, and that's where we are. All right, anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this?
If I may, perhaps just to bring a little bit of clarity, excuse me for not being Chairman. The substitute deals with items that would be most suspicious of whether or not they could trigger a compensation event. We haven't even really defined what a compensation event is, so rather than introduce a substitute with that, I would dispute that is the case at all. And so again, if the committee is convinced that is a concern that would rise to the level of making that a provision, then I've had a substitute prepared in case we need to strike that, if the committee reacts favorably to this at all.
All right, anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this? Anyone speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Nick Donahue, Deputy Secretary of Transportation. The administration does oppose this bill. I can go through various things, or I can answer questions, but maybe I'll start with a little bit of description and maybe answer some of the questions. There's a few pieces of context I'd like to just provide the committee to help explain our opposition. So some of the things that Delegate Verloc described, I'd just like to add. So I-66 inside the Beltway opened as an HOV-only road during rush hour, which meant that since 1982, when it opened, if you wanted to drive at the height of rush hour by yourself in a normal car, you could not do so legally. What we have found out over the years is many people were doing that illegally. So when we moved forward with this project in 2015 and then reached a compromise with the General Assembly in 2016 to implement this project, It was recognizing that there were HOV lanes today that we are converting to provide new travel choices to single drivers in this area. The budget language with the compromise recognized that there will be 4 hours of tolling that will be put in place there, both in the eastbound and then 4 hours in the westbound direction in the evening. So this is something that has been widely known and discussed with the public. We do have concerns with this for 2 reasons related to the I-66 provisions. The first is that the bill as written would trigger a compensation event in the I-66 outside the Beltway public-private partnership agreement. The reason for that is when we worked on the I-66 outside the Beltway project, our traffic and revenue study showed that the traffic and revenue outside the Beltway and the express lanes would be significantly greater if inside the Beltway was converted to express lanes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I just want to back up.
Hang tight, just a little. Elliot Watts.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Deputy, you made a comment a sentence or two back, and so if I understand it correctly, the road is only tolled, as the delegate said, in one direction in the morning and in the other direction at night. Can you walk me through why that would be? I come, my background, of course, is we pay a toll every time we want to come to the main part of Virginia. It's the same every day. So we know when we go, it's going to be $13. So I'm just curious as to the thinking on that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman and Delegate Blockman, there's 2 issues at play here, one about the fixed toll, one about the directional issues. So, Delegate LaRock is correct that as originally proposed, this project would have imposed dynamic tolling in both directions. Ultimately, due to concerns expressed by businesses along the Dulles corridor, as well as local governments in the area, the reverse tolling component was removed from the project during the fall of 2015. I would note that there are some significant differences between the eastbound in the morning and westbound in the morning. Eastbound in the morning has always been HOV for some period of time, which meant at the height of rush hour, you could not legally drive by yourself in a normal car on that roadway. You had to be a carpooler or some other special conditions. Westbound, however, those restrictions did not apply, and so it was perceived that imposing the dynamic tolling in the other direction where there had not been carpool restrictions would have been a much greater change. I believe that's why we heard concerns from businesses and Tyson's in the Dulles corridor, and that's part of why that was removed from that project. With regard to the fixed amount, under federal law, when you have a lane that's an HOV lane or restricted by carpools, you must charge a dynamic toll if you're going to allow non-carpool vehicles to access that facility to ensure free flow travel for the carpoolers and transit users in that corridor. So we cannot, by law, charge a fixed toll on that HOV lane because we'd be out of compliance with the federal code.
All right. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
So, and the reason this would trigger.
I'm just trying to get us, we got 3 minutes before we got a hard time, but for the next.
So I would say the private companies that are working outside the Beltway have invested $3.7 billion. Their lawyers and our lawyers worked on this. I understand the delegate is not clear whether this triggers a compensation event. We are very firm that it does trigger a compensation event. I think what is debatable is whether the private party chooses to exercise the right they have under the contract, and if they did choose to exercise it, what the impact of that would be. I would say the average toll round trip has been $11.15 from December 4th to January 18th. That is less than the average estimated round trip toll of $6. The press release delegate LaRock quoted did not say the toll would never exceed $6. It said it expected the average toll to be between $5 and $6. And Mr. Chairman, there are other problems as well, but respecting the time of the committee, I will answer any questions.
All right, thank you, sir. Yes, sir, come on forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michael Cooper with the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, who has our operational function is to manage Washington Dulles International Airport, Mount Holyoke Washington National Airport under a lease of the federal government. We are addressing our comments lines 67 through 89 of the bill that would request that the free airport access highway that was built by the Eisenhower administration and has been maintained as the free access highway be now turned into hot lanes. Maintaining them as a free airport access highway was envisioned a long time ago because it connects the Beltway with Dulles Airport. It is the economic lifeblood of keeping Dulles Airport functional. This assembly has invested just recently $50 million to help keep Dulles competitive. We'd be very, very concerned that this provision would
right-of-way without any charge to the Commonwealth of Virginia for that right-of-way. The Dulles Toll Road is the cash cow for the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. Couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is that the Dulles Toll Road users are helping to pay for a Metro Rail project that the Airports Authority, Loudoun County, Fairfax, and the Commonwealth of Virginia are all paying for. That we have bonds that will go past 2030, $1.8 billion of bonds that will go past 2030 to 2054. That is, that project is a $6 billion project. It is not counted against the Commonwealth debt ratio. So we assume full responsibility for that, and we need to maintain that. One last point on the free Dulles Airport Access Highway. Airport users already pay a $4.50 charge on every ticket for the passenger facility charges, and that is the source of revenue that we bonded for the $6 billion rail project. So to toll those same airport users is to make them pay twice. So I'll conclude at that point. There's other speakers, so thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Come on board.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mike Forehand, Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, wanted to echo the concerns that have been brought up, particularly as it relates to the certainty for private companies to contract in the P3 with the government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Noel Denise with Fairfax County. We do also have some concerns. We believe that the quick read in legislation on 66, it's only been in place for a couple of months, is a bit premature. And we also do have concerns about how it could affect the Silver Line as well. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else in opposition? Delegate, you have the last words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, words have a lot of meaning. I think concerns are a big one here. You've heard what happens when the numbers were run in 2005. The toll was forecast to be sufficient to fund the Silver Line if it was imposed at 75 cents. There's a variety of management decisions that have been made by the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority that have caused it to become a $5 toll. I don't think that necessarily all those were good decisions, but they certainly have the effect of passing on the burden of those decisions to the people using this corridor. I think that the Airports Authority ought to bear some of the weight themselves instead of just saying, we're too big to fail, or if you have a little bit more money and you know, your investment can go away. Changing up to the comments by Deputy Secretary Donahue.
Briefly, Delegate, just very briefly, so we've got to get on to the
Thank you. Bearing with me, Mr. Chairman, on this complicated issue that has huge bearing on the people I serve. Average toll $11, average toll $30. How do two different people come up with such different numbers? The Deputy Secretary has confirmed to me over and over again that this is every toll imposed on a stretch of road where you get on and off the road. So if you take a short hop on it and pay $5, that's not the east-west. The people I serve commute east-west on this road, and that average toll, because they pass over the entire length of this road, is way north of $11. Last but not least is this compensation event. It's fascinating that baked into an agreement inside the Beltway is a provision, is carried over into an agreement outside the Beltway. One controlled by Virginia, one controlled by a private entity. Absolutely no desire to disrupt the terms of this agreement. The proposal here is sunsetted with 2 years prior to the opening of outside the Beltway. So Secretary Donahue has just confirmed to me that when he says this would happen, what that amounts to, I think a better description is, it would give the express mobility partners outside the Beltway the opportunity to come and demonstrate that their revenues had been affected by tolling that had been sunsetted. So changes that had been made and put in place and expired 2 years before they opened their expanded I-66 outside the Beltway. To say that there's loss of revenue for something that happened 2 years prior and expired is extremely far-fetched. So technically, that's baked in, but the connection is so removed that it is very far-fetched. If it's the will of the committee to strike that, I have a substitute that does two things.
We're listening, sir.
Good. It does two things. It removes the suggestion that we change the time, which is, I think, the component that could be interpreted to trigger that. The second is to soften the wording so that, as it relates to the Airports Authority, that the only instruction would be that there would be negotiations to explore. That is pretty soft wording, and if the airport's authority isn't willing to do that, I hope the body would choose to move forward with this regard.
Delegate Rock, I want you in my foxhole, brother.
Sir?
And I say that sincerely. All right. Any members have any other further questions? All right. Chair needs a motion of some nature, and just for the benefit, we do have a letter from appropriations. Should this be received from full house transportation in some sense, it would need to be referred to appropriations, as well as some moving parts that have a fiscal impact to the Commonwealth, as well as the Secretary said, potential legal implications, but clearly Sir used incredibly adequately, and I think quite passionately said, absolutely has implications for all the constituents and the people in Northern Virginia, as well as the people in my district as well, who also have to traverse that corridor, although thankfully infrequently.
Thank you, Chairman. I do hope that I'll be given the opportunity to present this to the full committee, where there'll be a little bit more relaxed timeline for the presentation. Thank you, sir.
All right, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Given the robust discussion here and so many moving pieces, I do agree. I would ask that we refer this to the full committee. Well, recommend referring to approach and obviously to the full committee at that point.
All right, so we have two postures we can be in. One is to report it to the full committee with a recommendation of referred, and the other is, I think, to simply give our blessing that it needs to go to appropriations rather than reporting it favorably. Is that correct, Bob? Delegate Plum.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Yes, sir.
I move we pass by indefinitely.
So it's been, and that's our order. It's probably moved and seconded that House Bill 1489 be passed by indefinitely. You do have 2 minutes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
I think I've adequately made my presentation. I don't know how long you've done that motion.
Okay. And then opposition has 2 minutes if needed.
Mr. Chairman?
All right.
I'll speak in opposition to the PBI. We don't even really have the amendment in front of us yet. I would like to actually, at some point next meeting or at full committee, see what he's proposing. I think there's some merit to some things, but there's obviously some major concerns as well. We'd be PBIing the original bill without the amendment even in front of us, so I'll vote yes.
Well, again, Delegate, we gave him an opportunity to present those amendments directly to us. I don't have an amendment or substitute before me to act upon, so I have to act upon this document that's before us. Just for the members, hang with me, just for the members, if it's PBI, it's in this committee's venue, the only way it's going to get to full house transportation is for the chairman to take it out of this committee and take it to full. Bob? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, speaking to the proposal, there has been information presented that I think is hard to understand, some perhaps even slightly misleading, although not intentionally. So I think that given a full hearing in transportation, I would be, you have my full, complete assurance that if I'm advised by this committee, I would present this with the recommendation that we bring a substitute for the full committee.
Right. Folks have said, Delegate, so what is probably before us is that House Bill 1489 be passed by indefinitely. That is a recorded vote, but the electronic board is down, so I'm going to need a show of right hands, Bob?
Yes.
All right, all in favor of the motion to pass by indefinitely House Bill 1489, raise their right hand. All opposed, raise your right hand. And 7-3, because Delegate Rock is a member of the committee. 7-3, the motion to pass by indefinitely carries. So, Delegate, you know the posture it's in. The chairman is actually here, has heard all of this comments. Chairman Yancey, I very much appreciate your attendance this morning, sir. I think it's very critically important on this particular issue. With that, anything further to come before the subcommittee? And I humbly appreciate the subcommittee's work on this. You got a lot of work done today. We'll have one more meeting next week, and with that, committee will rise. I think full transportation will be meeting as quickly as we can turn over the electronic board and the members.
Well, you know, my brother, I woke up, finally by the time I fell asleep. I'm not that dedicated. Yeah. the only one that voted against it. Came with a substitute. Substitute there that